we start with a presentation of the 4 participants, and ladies first.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fatma Firzana. I'm from Pakistan. I shared with you yesterday afternoon a little bit, and again I would just say that in Pakistan we have had different forms of governance cycling between democracy and dictatorship. That is what I've seen since I've been born. When I was 18 years old, I went to Singapore for my undergraduate studies in life science, and I studied and worked in Singapore. And it's a wonderful city-state, and Singapore was a fishing village 40 years ago, and now it is a very big metropolitan city. And the reason that it has progressed so quickly is mainly because that they had one kind of a dictator leader who was very honest and sincere and capable, who could bring out a country which had no natural resources of its own to what it is now, one of the best economies of the world. And from Singapore, I came to Germany for my master's studies in neuroscience. And for the first time in my life, I saw the power of democracy. And in a country where democracy is practiced in one of its best forms. So after seeing these different diverse kinds of governance system in different countries, I am left with a question that in a country like Pakistan, where there's a high level of illiteracy and the rule of law is not free, then which kind of governance system should be practiced? Because for me, democracy is an evolutionary system which evolved over a long period of time to what it is now, because Europe got its position of democracy over centuries of evolution of what it is now, right now. So should I wait for my great-grandchildren that they would have a good, flourishing democratic nation, or should we be looking for another form of governance in a country like Pakistan where society is very fragmented and I can have a good nation within my lifetime? So that is my question.
Thank you very much. An enlightened dictator a la Singapore, or rather democracy?
Yes, that is what is to be seen.
It's a very good question. Igor.
Hello, I'm coming from Serbia, from the Yes family that is all around the world. I have great opportunity now to speak with you, and in the short I will try, from my background that is environment engineering, to bring you what is democracy in this moment in the Serbia. We have a big revolution, with a big question mark, is it really the revolution in 2000? Forced by United States from one side and Europe from the other side, where we have one party that was on the power going down, and very soon, after 3 years, the same party start to participate again in the governance of the other democratic elected parties. We have really strong leadership that is influencing lots of decisions in the parties, and parties has really strong influence to the rest of the citizens and what's happening in the country. During this conference, I really see that there are the difference in the understanding of democracy, basically what I understand and probably what most of you understand as democracy. For me, democracy is not right to go every 4 years and elect my representative in the parliament in some other structure. Democracy for me is to be there to say what is my opinion and to have possibility to influence much regularly what is important for me and on decisions that influence my life directly. So it's very interesting to see that West countries or West democracy are very ready to bring us democracy by the bombs or by the bribery with the money, without asking us, is it really that we want democracy? Is there some other system that will provide us some better future? Because when I go on the base level, I'm much more interested to have freedom of moving around, freedom of life, freedom of choosing my life partner, than to be asked about every question that is important maybe on the national level. We also discussed it that you have pretty strong opinion about something that is happening very far away. And it's really a big question for me, how you get this opinion? Is really mass media so influent to you that you have strong opinion about something that happened miles away? And you are pretty sure who was right and who was wrong. And you're ready to put your democratic decisions and to put your democratic power to your leaders that will influence the life of some other people? Is it really then democracy that I, in small countries, can choose what is best for me, or you will choose instead of me?
He goes in the same direction. Is it a good idea to export democracy, I would say, by force? Is it not up to the receivers or the sovereign states, people in other parts of the world which are not democratic so far to choose whether they want to be democratic or not? That is what you're saying. Now the Swiss, I think they have a different view of the world.
Yeah, a little bit. My name is Hermann Gröninger. As already stated, I study at the University of Zurich. I'm a student of biology, neuroinformatics, and law on the bachelor level. And my approach to democracy, obviously, is a Swiss approach. I'm a Swiss citizen. I go to the elections, I vote. And therefore, I have 4 key issues which I would like to tackle, which in my point of view are very, very important, are crucial for the future of democracy. The first one is direct democratic instruments, because I think the more complex things in a globalized world become, the more important it is that people can decide on in which direction their country goes. And therefore, we have to find a good solution to make a trade-off between flexibility on an international level and democratic legitimization, so that people really can identify themselves with the government, with the country, with the decisions taken by the government. The second point is consensual government, which hasn't been tackled at all during this conference, I think. Here it's more or less the same explanation. I think the more people, the more voices are present in the government, the more stable a country can talk on the international level, and the less changes happen. Third point would be the militia parliament. I must say I completely disagree with Ms. Beiler. I think the militia parliament is a good system we have here in Switzerland, especially because I, as a voter, I wanted to be able to vote people, not politicians. I want to be able to vote an entrepreneur, a lawyer, a teacher, a farmer, or I want to see what those people are doing, and I don't want to vote anybody who is in this political system for more than 15 years and hasn't had another professional background. This is very important for me. And the last point is the federative system, which I regard also as very, very important. It can also go in the direction of a democracy, as we have heard today. I can more or less agree with this point of view. And I just think that federative institutions can make the connection between, close a little bit down the gap between politics and the population. If we can bring things on a municipal, on a regional, and on a national level, if we can tackle politics on these 3 levels, people will be more attracted to politics. They will have a direct link to that, and I think this is very, very important.
So if I may summarize this Swiss point of view, the Swiss democracy is actually pretty good.
I would say so, yeah.
And you want to defend its institutions, militia system, direct democracy, federalism, because I would summarize it, because these institutions divide power and bring power closer to the people and involve people in the decision-making of the collectivity.
Exactly. I would just like to quote Abraham Lincoln: democracy is government by the people, of the people, for the people. And this has to be the key value of democracy.
You get your chance later. May I ask our Pakistani friend, isn't that an attractive model?
Well, it is a very attractive model, but if the preconditions, which I think is very necessary, and educated citizens, and plus of all justice, which is free, the rule of law is free. If those 2 preconditions are not met, then how can we have government by the people when people are not, morally, ethically, and intellectually educated enough to look for a leader who would be best for the whole nation, rather than choosing a leader who is of their tribe, of their ethnicity, of their kind of religion. So that is the first question. Secondly, if the justice is not free, that there is no checks and balances and the rulers are corrupt, then what should I do with that kind of democracy that when local individuals are suffering on the ground?
May I ask the specialist, Wolfgang Merkel?
Yeah, especially Professor Wolfgang Merkel. I believe you had a conference last year with some of the politicians of Pakistan in Berlin. If you can give a view over that.
Thank you for this promotion. One point, what we found out from our research on especially young democracies worldwide is the following. If there is a sequence of introducing first organization and institutions of participation and trying to establish rule of law later on, normally, especially in multi-ethnic and multi-religious communities, the rule of law will not really established. So very often then you have a kind of diminished subtype of democracy, what we call defective democracies. And these democracies most of these young democracies do not have a deficit in that much in free and fair election, but very much on the rule of law, the guarantee of civil rights. If I would be a promoter of democracy, I would very much focus on that from the outside. Of course, if the people want and demand an say in electing their politicians, this is clear, this cannot be stopped from the outside. A very small comment on this exporting democracy from the outside, even by force. I don't think there is a human right or even any legitimacy that you can force upon the people democracy. So who would like to invade Singapore, for example, to bring about a state where the rule of law is quite well working compared, let's say, to the democracy of Indonesia? Nobody would really dare it. But if you intervene on the grounds of humanitarian reasons, as it could have been done, this was not the official declaration, could have been done in Afghanistan and in Iraq, then there is a duty that you stay. You stay that long until you can leave, as John Rawls has put it, you can leave well-ordered people. And if you read Rawls, he's very much insisting, not that much on participation, but very much on rule of law.
Igor, you want to react?
Yeah, I would like to react on this, because I think that we have a problem of gravity. Very easily. It's much easier to go when there's somebody who is big going before you. And he's making the way and you just follow it. So you're pretty sure that if somebody say, as from the big democracy, there is the problem, we will follow to fix it, even by the force, it's totally okay. And it will bring the people better future. I'm not sure that it will bring really better future. Especially because I really strongly believe that big democracy try to play the game called games and the bread for their own local citizens. If I show you what are the big problems in the other countries, you will be pretty satisfied with my governance in your country, because they are doing much worse. And if you are not good, maybe this system can be changed, and we are not sure this change will be positive. So from the sustainable development, look, nobody came in countries to force them to use resources as sustainable as possible. Everybody came to put someone out of power because they have interest in this country. If they don't have any more interest in this country, they go away. They say, okay, now my citizens have a problem with it, and I will try to protect my interests, so going away home and say, okay, I did the big change, and leaving the citizens in the country that you occupied in total mess.
It's a clear statement, but before we go back to this, we would like to give a chance to Claudio, because he has not yet had his chance.
Just a short presentation. I'm Claudio Ruch. I'm studying mechanical engineering at the ETH in Zurich, and I'm participating in Academia Engelberg for the Swiss Study Foundation. And I would like to come back on the topic of comparison of Singapore and Switzerland. In my opinion, it's very interesting to observe that today in this environment of rapid change and of globalization, which is not only economical, but also more and more cultural and political, we can observe countries like Singapore and China, for example, emerge rapidly. And we have heard this morning that in Europe, people increasingly demand an acceptable output performance of their governments. We heard that in the first speech. And I assume that this output is of economical nature, so people demand employment, turnover, economical growth, wealth. And I'm asking myself, if we take in account the ever-growing importance of those facts and the ever-growing importance of competitiveness in an international market, are we forced to get faster, leaner, and more flexible as a political system, as a country, as a democracy, even if the price is less democracy? Or is long-term stability of democracy to be valued higher, not only in a moral way, but also out of a utilitaristic point of view?
So, a Swiss question, whether we should not become a little bit more like Singapore in a world which is maybe not suited to the complexities of this fragmentation of power you advocate.
Yeah, may I respond to that? I agree regarding on what you said on the short-term advantages that let's say authoritarian system brings, because of course economic is a quite fast developing area, and therefore if few people decide, they can react faster. But in the end, we've got to see, who are they deciding for? Do they really decide for the people, for the country, or are they just deciding for themselves, so they have the most advantage for themselves? And as long as there is a common welfare in an authoritarian system, that everybody stays more or less well, there won't be too many problems. But now, as soon as the economy has some problems, there comes in the big advantage of democracy, because a democracy can deal with that. They have democratic system to deal with the anger or the unease of the people. They can take the initiative. For example, in Switzerland, they can vote on a referendum. They can elect other people, and this ain't possible in a authoritarian system. And therefore, I would say the long-term advantages lie clearly on the side of democracy.
So, okay, I would like to comment. I mean, I totally agree with you that democracy gives that flexibility of dealing with complexity of the issues, and if there's like more anger and frustration, which we obviously see in the case of China, that they are kind of afraid of their minorities who are trying to rise, but they keep on suppressing them. But then it is the fact that, like just Professor Wolfgang said, that in my country where there is already a multiplicity of ethnicities and the civil institutions are not strong, then how do we bring the rule of law? Because when there is no justice, then how is it going to progress? Because I do not see a way out. And even for European countries, I can say that 2-3 centuries ago, it was basically monarchy, and then it moved to democracy, partially because of the fact that people wanted power in their hands instead of just concentrating. But the basis and the fact that Switzerland has been Switzerland for centuries, the sense of nationalism was already there. So even if that is not there, then how where the country would easily disintegrate in a place like Pakistan, where every nation, every kind of tribal would say, I want my state, my country, and I want my country.
Maybe if I may say something here, I mean, Switzerland was pretty tribal too. Even in 1848, when the federal state was created, and one position is that you might say the institutions, once they are practiced and are in place, they create their own preconditions. So the practice of Switzerland 150 years ago had the people did not have direct experience with the institutions that were brought to them, but by the elites. But by practicing these institutions, they learned how to deal with them, and the elites learned how to deal with them, and finally, these institutions function today as they do. So, why not have the confidence that certain democratic, I mean, India, your next door neighbor, has practiced democracy since 50 years. Maybe it's not the perfect democracy, but by practicing it, they have made big strides in becoming ever more democratic, I would maintain.
Well, then I can say, I mean, personally, I do agree with you, but firstly, like India did not have the neighbor Afghanistan as its neighbor, where in 1980s the Soviet Union came, and now the USA is there, and I'm not sure if they are going to stay there for another 20, 30 years, which continuously bring destability in the country. But then should I then resign to the fact that I try to contribute to the country, but it would only flourish after, let's say, 100 years from now?
Claudia wants to respond.
I would as well take the example of Swiss history here, because 160 years ago, when Switzerland was founded, there was also a very time which is not that easy for us. There was a lot of things going on, and I think as well you should focus not on law and justice, but on the ability to agree and make people engage in a political discussion. And this should be the beginning, and then the institutions will come. So I think this should be, in a democratical way, the first step for you.
One another thing that I would like to bring in is that that is keeping Pakistan aside. We have a lot of democracy in a globalized world. When we are faced with bigger global issues like climate change and then terrorism and these facts, I already do not see Western leaders addressing something as basic as sustainability, which is extremely important, and it has to be agreed upon by all of the world together. So then is it that democracy is also going to flourish and work with these bigger challenges coming up in the Western society as well as in other parts of the world? Okay.
Igor.
Okay, I think that you estimated the influence of the international affairs, especially in the small countries. So it is really big influence on the people and much more on the political elite. What is decision made for the country? Usually, if you try to look behavior of some countries as behavior of the people, lots of people will be in the jail or in the some of hospital because they don't behave normally. Totally what is normal for us on the local level, it's not normal for the countries on the international level. Because if we, for example, climate change, if we agree that there is a problem and that we need to solve it, why the biggest power didn't make the biggest influence on it? It's much interesting to see how they are not using force to put this on the top agenda. It's not too much interesting for their voters, but to put, there are other problems that we need to solve, not looking in our house what is happening.
May I respond exactly to that? As I've seen, we all agree on the fact that democracy shall be the kind of system we want in future, or have I understood you correctly? We only disagree on how it shall be installed and how it shall be managed. And I've already stated which kind of democracy I have in mind, but I would be interested, how could we, since we're talking about the future of democracy, how could we find a democratic system which can deal with all the defiances that come within a globalized world? Especially, you've also mentioned the ever-growing importance of bilateral, multilateral treaties, and therefore we must ask ourselves, how can we deal with the question of democratic legitimization of international treaties? How far shall people be able to decide on such matters? Which kind of things shall be left to the government? But where shall the people directly state their opinion? And in this case, I again have a more basic democratic view. I think the people want to decide, they can decide, and they will decide. And the only question is, how can we make a system that this functions without problems.
But I'm still preoccupied by Igor's interjections, because what he's actually saying is that the democracies are hypocritical. They are not behaving in a democratic way with respect to other nation states, where they bring great gifts, which are not independent of their own highly material interests, and they don't actually do what they proclaim one should do at the international level. And so maybe, I mean, I have no answer to this, but I feel very sympathetic to this claim, and I think democratization today for countries which are maybe seeking democracy in their own ways is very different from democratization we once had in Europe, because you find yourself in a world with great asymmetries of power, where democracies are leading the way and are the most powerful nations, and where they do not always live up to their own ideals, which puts into question these ideals in the eyes of people who aspire to become something like a democracy, I still would say. Because you talked about rule of law as the first step, and I agree with you. This is an integral part of the liberal democratic model. Liberal is rule of law, and the first step to institutionalization of liberal democracy certainly is the establishment of rule of law.
Yeah, I'll agree totally with you. What I was even more to stress, if you really want to help someone, don't show him way, learn him how to do some things. Because in education, I can understand and I can predict what will happen if I have enough knowledge about it. But if you show me this way and you say you must go this way, immediately when you turn off, I will go again how I think it's better.
Yeah, everybody has a final say. Fatima.
I mean, that's exactly what I totally agree in terms of Afghanistan, because the NATO forces can stay there for decades and it would not change unless the people over there are educated, and the culture there is the tribal culture is so strong. But anyways, I do not wish to say more about it, but the fact is that in a globalized world, I mean, the democracy as it is practiced in Western countries cannot be implemented all over the world because in Asia, even in Serbia or even in Africa, our cultural values, our religious beliefs can overtake our ability to have equality, to be equal and one man, one vote kind of democracy. So there has to be a greater understanding that democracy in different forms and shapes, which might actually be taking another name in years to come instead of democracy, would be the foreseen of the world.
Claudia.
In my opinion, we're mixing up two different topics here, because the first thing is, and I truly believe that democracy, and especially a federal democracy as we have it in Switzerland, is the only way of being successful and stable in the long term. Or maybe there are also others, but democracy in general, and I quote Professor Abel here, democracy is the only internally justified type of order. That's the first discussion. And I think also for countries like your countries, this is the best way. The second is that we today have to cope with problems that are global. Climate change, just to name the most, one example, the most famous example. And there we need to establish other structures, for example, multilateral democracies, and how the different countries interact in those systems. It's another question for me.
Selman.
Yeah, I would also agree with what Claudia said about the international challenges we have to manage. But if we think this on, and if we go into the direction of an international democracy, I see one major problem. There are evidently severe differences between the regions of the world. And in my opinion, the democracy can only work if the key values are the same, if the key understandings are the same, and therefore an international system, an international democracy, similar to Swiss democracy, wouldn't work right now, I think, because it is evident for me that, for example, the Western world has different values as the Asian world, has different values as the Islamic world, and therefore we must consolidate first these regions before we can even talk about a further, how do you say, a further closure of the whole global international system, because there are no the basis for this is not given yet, in my opinion, on a political level.
Thank you very much. We are at the end of this small debate. Servan, Claudio, Igor and Fatima, thank you very much for a very interesting talk.